The 18 Strong Podcast, episode 143 with Kelly Starrett of Mobility WOD.
And I think that's one of the things about golf that's so unique. The speed forces and rotation forces involved means that I better have full rotation, especially through the hips. And I have to have tissues that can handle those speed forces, because the speed, that acceleration component, is much harder on the tissues than the load component.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where, as you know, we like to talk to some of the most entertaining and interesting guests in the world of fitness, nutrition, sleep, performance, whatever it might be, mental game, in order to help you reach your highest potential at golf, at life, just simply being a better, stronger, more fit human being that loves to play the game of golf. And so today I have a very special guest, somebody that I've actually been wanting to interview since the very first day of the 18 Strong Podcast, and that is Kelly Starrett from Mobility WOD. Kelly is one of those guys that is just kind of at the forefront. He's one of the pioneers, as far as I'm concerned, in the world of fitness. Just a little bit of background on Kelly in case you haven't come across his work before. He's a physical therapist, but he is one of the world's most well-renowned strength coaches and has worked with Olympic athletes, CrossFit competitors, and basically everybody under the sun. After owning his gym for several years, Kelly started to build a brand called Mobility WOD, and it really started with him making a commitment to shoot a video every single day for a year on some form of mobility or exercise or fitness related topic. And his content has just continued to grow, and they have amassed such a huge array of fitness and performance information on how you can help yourself either assess your injuries, assess your pain, create better mobility, improve your lifting techniques, all kinds of things. Kelly's the author of 3 books currently. He's got another one coming out, which he'll talk about in the episode. First one is Ready to Run. The second is Supple Leopard, which is it's basically a textbook on how to fix your body, which is incredible. And then the most recent one is Desk Bound, and we'll talk a little bit about their initiative, he and his wife's initiative on getting kids and basically getting people out of the sitting position and getting out of those postures that have really kind of affected our whole generation as far as the way that we move and the way that we perform. As I mentioned, I've been a big fan of Kelly's work for a long time, and I know the fitness professionals and medical professionals listening to the show are probably very familiar with him or know a little bit about his work. But there's so much stuff in here that we talk about that pertains to you and you helping yourself to become a better mover, become a better golfer, and why you're doing this stuff and what you should be thinking about, as opposed to just improving specifically a certain joint for your golf game or your golf swing, how we can go about that from a bit of a bigger, more global picture. Things like, why is it so important to warm up, and how, what has the most effect on our tissue, and what do we need to prepare for before a round of golf. A couple of the most important things that the body or the human needs to do in order to replenish tissue and make sure that we're ready to respond to our training stimulus or to our golf game. And then we kind of go into defining mobility and what Kelly's take is on that, and how we can, again, prepare ourselves not just for a specific activity we're going to do that day, but for things that we are going to just be doing in living our life. And then the concept of not that practice makes perfect, but practice makes permanent. And so the things that we do on a regular basis, either intentionally or unintentionally, how those affect our lives. So Kelly's just such a great, entertaining guest. I know that you'll really, really enjoy this conversation and all the different directions that we go in. We were even able to answer some questions from the 18 Strong Movement, our Facebook group, and get some of those questions that some of the listeners had. So I know you're really going to enjoy this episode. And before we jump into the interview with Kelly, I want to just say a quick thanks to one of our featured sponsors for today's episode, which is Scratch TV. If you haven't checked them out yet, go to scratchtv.com and you can check out just basically an array of content revolving around the world of golf. There's videos from celebrities, fans, highlights from the PGA Tour, and pretty much anything cool that's happening in the world of golf. They bring it into the mix at Scratch TV. They do a great job of highlighting the fact that golf really should be fun, and most of us play it not to get mad at ourselves and throw our clubs, but to actually enjoy the game and enjoy the fact that we're outside just hitting a white ball around, enjoying ourselves. So I love their tagline. It's just golf. Try not to take it so seriously. And I think that's exactly what the guys there are doing a great job of bringing to the mix. So go to scratchtv.com and check out all of the videos, all the content there, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. All right, let's get into the interview with the supple leopard himself, Mr. Kelly Starrett. Kelly, it's so much of an honor to have you on the show. Welcome to the 18 Strong podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. I have to tell you, I pretty much have had you on the list of people that I wanted to get on the show pretty much since day one. And so this is pretty cool to finally get you on the show. And I know that we've got a lot of people in the 18 Strong community that have peppered us with some questions to ask you. So we're going to get to as many as we possibly can. We're going to go in many different directions. But just want to say it's very cool to finally have you on, being one of the basically pioneers in kind of this content, social media world where you're actually providing value and content for all of us, fitness professionals, but also just the everyday person as well, teaching them how to basically take care of their bodies. So first, big thank you.
Oh, dude, my pleasure. You know, it's fun to be working in a time where there's two things have happened. One is that we are standing on the backs of giants who have literally been holding the door open for us for a long time. I mean, if you look at the people out there making the case to talk about positional quality as a limiting factor, and as in sort of sustainability, as in high performance, resiliency, whatever phrase we're going to look. I mean, guys like Verstegen, guys like Greg Cook. I mean, literally, we are so lucky. Internet comes along. People start to get curious. And I think we've seen a quantum leap in terms of how everyone approaches this. There's this generation of us. I'm 44, who grew up doing more sport. Like, that was the answer, just more sport, work harder. And then some of us started to train a little bit and got interested in, in some lifting and some other things. But, a lot of the patina of people in their 30s and 40s and even 50s now, we're seeing that, volume ramped up without the support or without the idea of being able to identify compensation. Now the internet comes along and people can suddenly understand, self-diagnose, and be curious about performance as it relates to day to day. So it wasn't just the domain of the most elite athlete on the planet, which is traditionally how it was,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I've really appreciated watching your videos for so long, and I want to kind of give a little backstory here for the people that may not have come across your stuff yet, but is the communication style that you take when you're doing your videos is so much of a personal communication, because you're actually talking to the person that wants to improve their own body, not just the fitness professional or the athlete, but the person that would come into your gym or my gym, or the person that's at home doing this stuff on their own. They like to go to the gym themselves. They're involved in sports or whatnot. So I really love the way that you have communicated with the person themselves, and almost like you're talking directly to them. And so for those people that are like that, the golfers that are listening, we've got a ton of medical professionals and fitness professionals listening as well. But for the golfers that may not have come across your stuff, can you give us a little background? I know they can go to your website and find the whole history of everything, but take us back to 2010 when you decided, hey, we're going to start shooting a video every single day, and we're just going to see where it goes.
Well, it's interesting that time in 2010, we have a bunch of millennials who work at our gym and coach at our gym who are just extraordinary athletes and coaches. But I have to remind them that when we started this video project back in 2010, we'd already been teaching a course for 2 or 3 years. So we were already kind of had formal instruction on the community. I've been running a gym already for 5 or 6 years. Was a physical therapist and a coach and a broken former national team athlete. So I had all this experience. And YouTube was a new idea. The iPhone didn't even have a video feature yet. Like, that's how long ago this was. And so to be able to suddenly be able to put up a blog. We were on Blogger when we started, and like Blogger, people were like, what's Blogger? I mean, if you type in, you can see our old blog stuff. But one of the things that happened is I actually filmed on a camera, had to download it to the computer, then upload it. And it took like 40 minutes to, the first time we made a video, it took me like 2 hours to get it edited and post and write the content. My wife was like, this will not stand. Like, no
We're
way.
We're going to do this for a year?
Oh my God. So the short story was that we were working in athletics, working in performance, and doing the physio side, and traveling around and seeing people's dirty laundry. And I felt like we hadn't done a good job of trying to raise the bar in terms of saying, hey, look, there's some basics here that we all should be able to understand. And let's see if we can just solve these first 10 problems. And, someone came in one time, to have me look at their overhead squat, and they'd flown in from Japan, must be nice. Yeah. And, and I was like, well, overhead squat for me. And the guy bent over at 90 degrees. And he's like, my shoulders aren't flexible enough. And I was like, bro, your torso, you're looking at the ground. Like, what? How do you think is your shoulders? It has nothing to do with your shoulders. It has everything to do with your crappy ankles. And one of the things that we saw was, I saw a really high-level Olympic lifter kid who was just super talented, and he was missing his cleans at the bottom position. And it turns out his quads were just really stiff. No one had ever shown him how stiff the fascia and musculature was of his quadriceps, and that was limiting. And when there's an old video, you can see me standing on his quads in the P rack. And a lot of the techniques we evolved were solving the problems with tools that didn't exist. I heard about some smashing a long time ago, or mashing, and I was like, that sounds compelling. And then I had these powerlifters and Olympic lifters in my gym, and I was like, man, isn't it weird that the foam roller isn't enough to get into your quadriceps? And we need a lot more pressure, and we need to dissociate those tissues. And I started standing on people. And it's interesting, Diane Fu, who is an Olympic lifting coach out of our gym, is out at the Chinese National Development Center in China right now. And there is a kid who's, I think he's like a 48 kilo lifter, maybe a 52 kilo lifter, something like that. And he's just marching back and forth on another kid's legs, like mashing grapes. Like if I did that to any athlete in the United States, first you would vomit, then you would black out and wake up in your own vomit. And the kid laying there is he's like, yeah, it's not enough. I actually need a fatter lifter. And so what we decided was a long time ago, let's at least initiate a conversation so that people can begin to take a crack at it. Because what we were seeing is that, Rob Wolf is a good friend, and people were becoming very sophisticated about nutrition, and we were seeing people actually finally warming up, like novel concept, right, before they rotate and spin, do all that. And they were training hard, and starting to see, thanks in part to CrossFit, what Pavel has been doing forever and ever, we're starting to see that everyone is holding kettlebells. People are squatting, people are overhead squatting. I mean, the overhead squat is part of the functional movement screen back in '96. So these things have been around. Dan John is beating the drum for all these things. And, training is becoming sophisticated, but they could not identify what was normal range of motion. They could not identify what the hallmarks of compensation were, and they couldn't identify any of their own components to those problems. And so when someone had a shoulder impingement or a hot back or a hip tweak or something was going on, Achilles tendinopathy, they couldn't correlate how they moved with what the problem was. They're just like, I don't know, I just woke up and I was like this one day. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like you can't even put your arms over your head and you're complaining about your shoulder impingement. Well, that's the problem, is that having these incomplete ranges begets incredible compensation that can happen at an extraordinary level. And it's hard to see, and then you either are that athlete who doesn't break and you get away with the compensation and eventually have to solve it because you're tired of losing, right? And you're giving away too much force or too much drive or accuracy, or you get injured and you get religion, and even the best. I think Tiger Woods is such a good example right now of someone who is sort of failed by the patina of serious strength and conditioning. It looked like he was doing the right things, but we know he was not on there squatting. No one, they were just putting out fires and over again. And our look, you can make the case that at high levels, you're going to see the body compensate in ways that may lead to dysfunction in the end hall. But we don't believe that. What we believe is that, in the long game, you should come out unharmed. So if you have to stop golfing when you're 40, then it's going to be really difficult for me to accept that your ideal swing is such that you had 2 neck surgeries at age 36. So there's something going on with that. And accidents do happen. You do get crashed. Things do happen. You may have taken those injuries from college into your sport. But I think we've got to do a better job of realizing that, you're going to be on this planet for 100 years. And if you can't put your arms over your head or wipe yourself and get off the ground because of the decisions you made in your 20s, that's a heavy duty deal. It's heavy duty. And I've got a couple bad injuries. I have terrible wrist extension because I broke my hand, I broke my wrist, I tore the cartilage in my wrist. So I just don't have any wrist extension. And that means that I can't do some things, but some things I can do fine. And a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, I wiped out skiing really fast, and I put my femur through my tibia. So I have this little hot bone-on-bone lesion. So you see me front squat and deadlift, you don't see me power clean anymore. You see me, kettlebell swing, you don't see a lot of violent jumping and landing. So the idea is, look, things are going to happen. We're going to get injured. But this capacity for the human being is so immense that we need to play this long game. And the long game means that we have to eat like human beings. We can't neglect ideas of rest and stress reduction. We have to be competent in our positions. And those positions should not be points of debate. Stable shoulder positions is stable shoulder position. So, and again, you have to come out unharmed at 1 rep or at 1,000,000 reps. And if you don't, the CrossFit Games this weekend is a great example of what's happening with the regionals. So all these pec tears, what we're seeing is, there's been 25 pec tears out of 200 guys. And what you're seeing is that that's not a ring dip problem. We've been doing ring dips. I've been doing ring dips in my gym, for 12 years now, and we've had 1 pec tear, and that guy had, really bad problems, and it was a minor tear, and that was his fault, and he was like, my fault. But what we're seeing is, in that time, what is it about our restricted range of motion at intensity? And I think now what we're seeing is people are so strong and so competent. They're fit, much fitter and stronger than we were a decade ago. Not that there weren't strong people a decade ago, but that now the speed wobbles start to matter even more because we're so competent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, kind of going back to a bit of the Tiger Woods reference and, especially with the golfers and the population that it is, tending to be a little bit, obviously there's very competitive golfers, college, professionals, but a lot of the folks that we talk to are those guys that are getting into their 40s, 50s, and maybe they were athletic and they spent a lot of time in the gym, and now they're starting to notice these little things, these little issues, and all of a sudden they're like, what the hell, I guess this is just getting old. But what I love is that you don't accept the fact that just getting old doesn't mean that you're going to start to hurt. In fact, you kind of talk about what it's like to be a human in the 21st century and all the different things that we need to do. What are some of the biggest issues that you see with, just general population, maybe if you can tailor it towards the golfer these days, where guys are kind of missing the boat, guys and girls are kind of missing the boat on, improving that performance so they don't just accept the fact that, okay, I'm 40 years old, it's time to go downhill? Well,
I think what we need to do is understand that human beings are amazing adaptation machines. Like you can smoke cigarettes and drink a Bud Light and have a chocolate donut and still crush everyone, because you are that awesome for a while. You can do that for a while. So one of the things that we always say is, well, is the sport you're doing, are you really such a unique snowflake that it's different than the demands of every other sport? Because it seems to me in every other single sport, we do things like warm up and dynamic drills and positional mechanics, right? And we train for sport, but yet there are these, let's just call it contests of skill, where like golf, where suddenly you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm exempt from the laws of human biomechanics and physiology, and that's not true, one of the amazing things about golf is that, like, you walk a 10K. That's the amazing thing, right? Mm-hmm. And the amazing thing is you probably golf better at the end of the 10K than you do at the beginning because you're actually this thing called warmed up finally, right? You're doing all this walking. So when we see is that people are still making the basic adaptation errors. And we see it's not just golf. We see it in things like recreational skiing. I'm like, so you got up, chugged some coffee, got in the car, put on your boots, and then skied. Like 50 miles an hour. Like, what? Like, what? That's madness, right? Yeah. And so, what we try to say is, hey, look, if the golf course is not the place to warm up, I understand that. then that's the warm up at your house, So get a sweat going, do our 27 squat sequence, do some pull aparts, do your golf prep. I mean, go to the Titleist Performance Institute. There is 10,000 videos about, basic warm ups. You have, how much content do you have about just getting yourself primed? Then you get to the golf range and you've already touched those corners. Then it really is just about developing your swing again and getting your feel back. But, the idea that like, hey, I'm just not going to hit the ball hard for 10 minutes, like that's nonsense. And so subsequently, it's really difficult for us to prepare tissues in an ideal way. And so now it's really difficult to understand the noise on the back of that, especially since if we took a cross section of people's lives and we said, let's look at your 24-hour cycle. Are you prepared? Are you doing what human beings should do, which sort of isn't debatable anymore, about sort of the maintenance of the human being? And don't get me wrong, I know you can compensate and I know you can get by, but we can start with the conversation of sleep. So I'm not a huge data tracker guy. I'm just not into wearable technology. And I have tried them all. I have had the Oura Ring and the Whoop Band, and I've done Omega Wave and CNS Tap. I mean, we try, because I'm always looking for better ways to bring consciousness to practice. But it does turn out that there are two pieces of information that I think are very, very valuable around using a tracker. And I'll give you an example. One of the Combined Arms Group is an elite Army group, and they will use something called a Ready Band. And the Ready Band is by Fatigue Science. And the reason I like it goes back to the reason I have a doctorate in physical therapy. And that is the thing stays charged for 2 weeks. And if I have to have a band that I have to recharge every night, it's out, because there's no way I'm not charging this. That's one more thing I have to do but the Fatigue Science Ready Band stays charged for 2 weeks. I think some of these other things do too. And it tracks sleep, and it does a really good job, and it tracks motion during the day. And those are two benchmarks that really make a big difference. When we ask people, how much sleep should you get? Do you sleep enough? Then the answer always is, no, I need to sleep more. And I'm like, well, why don't you? And they're like, because Netflix is on and I have Facebook. And so we're making very, very strong decisions about the amount of growth hormone you're going to put out, the amount of testosterone you're going to put out in deep sleep, right? The restoration, your ability to actually go into a fasted state. And that has a direct impact and correlation to the quality of your tissues, which matters at speed even more than it matters under load. And I think that's one of the things about golf that is so unique. The speed forces and rotation forces involved means that I better have full rotation, especially through the hips. And I have to have tissues that can handle those speed forces, because the speed, that acceleration component, is much harder on the tissues than the load component, right? I can be a kind of an inflamed powerlifter and squat down really slow and squat up really slow forever. And I can continue to shovel down Taco Bell and set PRs. But I cannot move fast and not have tissues that handle that. And the problem is we have golf technology, and it must be this golf, and I'll assess my swing through these apps. But needless to say, you're starting with compromise in the tissues. So, the problem now, again, is that as modern humans, we've been sort of sold this bill of goods. I'll take this turmeric and I'll have this resveratrol and and I check. And I'm trying to solve problems with additional inputs instead of taking care of business first. And someone taking care of business first is, look, if you're serious about tissue health and recovery and adaptation and regeneration, you have to manage your sleep. And we don't see many populations that thrive less than 7 hours of sleep. And that's 7 hours of good sleep, right? That's not, I get in bed and I futz around for 20 minutes. And so even for our hard athletes, we really want people who are, walking a 10K is legit. Carrying your own bags is legit. And you should be thinking that, if I'm playing tomorrow, the greatest impact that we can see on fine motor control skill and cognition is sleep. So if you're not hitting the ball well, when's the last time someone said to you, "Hi, did you sleep last night?" It's never happened in the history of the sport.
No,
people are like, it's this shoe and the wind, and sometimes the greens just don't want you, and the ball's not breaking right. I'm like, dude, it's not the golf, it's you, son. which is one of the reasons that golf is so interesting, right? Is I have this very, very complex motor skill, which is so much, and then I've got to apply that complex motor skill to variable conditions. And so one of the things that we're always trying to do is say, how do we reduce variability in the swing, right? How do I set up the same way every single time? I adjust the ball the same way, I organize my spine the same way, I try to breathe the same way, so I can make a more uniform swing, right? I can change, so I don't have all these sort of nefarious inputs affecting outcomes. But then we can apply that same level of thinking to some of these other things. Well, did I warm up today? Hey, that time I played really great. Well, it turned out I'd played pickup basketball with my kids before, or you know what I mean? I had already been to the gym. I wonder if that impacted my ability to turn and rotate. Yeah, I probably did. And what we want to do is make sure that we are taking care of business, and sleep is one of the first things. And we, unfortunately, what gets measured gets managed, as you know. And so when we do have our athletes hook themselves up to sleep checkers, they are universally, nearly 100% of the time, shocked that they're not getting the sleep they report that they're getting. So that's one of the reasons I like it. Number two is sleep for a follow-up for tracker, is that I don't think people are moving around enough during the day. So, if you're an elite athlete, you still need to move during the day, because a lot of people are thinking is like, hey, I'm going to golf later, so I'll rest. But it turns out that the human being is designed to be in constant motion. So one of the things that we see with people who have a hard time falling asleep is that when we check their activity levels during the day, it turns out they're not moving enough. They physically don't move around enough. So one of the ways that we can improve their sleep is to say, hey, I just need you to walk 10,000 steps today. And lo and behold, when they accumulate enough movement during the day, they end up sleeping better, right? So you start to see this feedback. And when I move more during the day, I get better circulation, I get decongestion of tissues, I'm able to improve, there's a whole bunch of sort of net positive effects that happen, including my spine being like a young person's spine. So, we can just start there for the greatest impacts that, are affecting your game inadvertently.
Yeah, I think, you said that nobody ever asks you how you slept if you're playing bad golf. And we've brought some people on the show like a Sean Stevenson and some other folks talking about, just kind of opening the eyes to the fact that it's something that we haven't paid attention to. And I think the quality piece is so important too, because everybody says, you should get 8 hours of sleep. But well, if it's crappy 8 hours, that doesn't matter either. But if you're able to track a little bit and see, okay, I wasn't up 10 times or 20 times during that 7 hours of sleep, that makes a huge difference. Going back to kind of the loading of tissue and especially the velocity piece of it, what are ways that we can, aside from warming up, other ways, because obviously you're the mobility guy, that we can kind of prep our tissues for some of that velocity, knowing that we're about to swing a golf club, or even away from the course in the gym? How do we prep, knowing that, okay, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to be playing 4 rounds of golf, or I'm going to be playing a lot of golf this summer? Let's take a quick break to thank our other featured sponsor for today's episode, which is Super Speed Golf. I've talked about them many times on the show before. Super Speed Golf is the #1 overspeed training device and system that you can use in order to gain massive improvements in your club head speed. But not just the speed of your swing. I think it's also important to mention the fact that by utilizing this system, you gain so much more balance and awareness of what's going on in your body, both with right-handed and left-handed swings. It's super important to not just swing the same way every single time. And one of the key ingredients of using the overspeed training system that has been developed by the guys at Super Speed is the fact that you swing the club both ways. And while that may sound kind of futile, swinging left-handed, and it's going to feel super weird the first time you do it, by doing this, swinging it the opposite direction, you're teaching your body how to balance itself, how to coordinate movements and patterns in your swing, and you're breaking down some of the imbalance that you've created in your body by swinging the same way over and over and over for so many years. If you think about it, how many times have you swung a golf club in the same direction? Your body is constantly rotating that way. By going the other direction, you're going to teach your body first just how to move better, but also how to accelerate and decelerate different parts of your body that are very important in your golf swing when you're hitting it from your normal stance. I can't tell you how much of a difference this has made in so many of my clients' games, not just swinging faster and being able to hit a ball farther, but also being able to control themselves on the tee box when they swing. So go check out Super Speed Golf. Just go to superspeedgolf.com. You can get a discount on any of their sets, their clubs, their radar devices by using the code 18STRONG. Now let's get back to Kelly.
Well, I don't think that there's a time where I should be golf ready and not golf ready. I should be able to walk out like you're like, hey, we're playing golf today. I'm like, oh, great, let's go play golf. By the way, kudos on your drinking implement there. I really respect a man who drinks from. That's what I'm talking about. I see you.
The people listening
hipster.
Don't know that I drink out of a monster mason jar.
You hipster. So you even have a beard, and you probably have a leather apron back there somewhere. So the idea here is that what we have said to people is you go to the gym, get stronger, right? And with the idea that that if I just got stronger, it would solve all problems. And we can, again, let's say, does that hold true? Well, we say in business, revenue solves all problems. And you're like, not really. You still have a crap culture and bad turnover, and you're highly inefficient. But as long as you're revenue positive, it's fine. As long as I get stronger, it's fine. And what we've seen now is that, how we move, and especially seeing the gym as a way of challenging robustness of position and finding out where I have moved away from normal capacity, right? Because there's nothing about the golf swing that requires supranormal abilities. There's nothing that says you need to have the range of motion of a gymnast. But a lot of people can't correlate the fact that the shapes of the shoulders in the golf club correlate to the shapes of the traditional classical strength and conditioning pieces. That in Supple Leopard and on our model, our movement and mobility model, what we've done is we've identified what we call the bookends of range of motion around the shoulder. And the shoulder, for example, has four fundamental archetypal end range positions that get expressed regularly in the sort of bread and butter strength and conditioning movements like push-up, like front squat, like pull-up, being able to, snatch, go from internally, swing a kettlebell. These shoulder positions also reflect positions that all have a range of motion rotation component. And I think that's where people get confused. If I bench press, for example, it's a language everyone kind of speaks a little bit. You probably bench pressed once in your life. And my elbow flares out. That's not a good bench press, right? My elbow should look like it's on a rail. It goes up and down, and I'm keeping it tucked. And if I bench and my elbow flares, what's really happening is I'm missing rotational stability, and I'm actually rotating into an unstable, less effective position to generate force to solve a movement pattern. And then if I reinforce that movement pattern, we say that practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. This is why we'd rather have people with brand new swings come in, right? And we're teaching skills. I'll take that person who has no motor skill versus the person who's already swung a million times and then gets stressed is going to default to that old swing. And one of the things that we're looking at then is, can we assess these bookends of range of motion? So when we define mobility, it's important that we do, because mobility has become a word that's synonymous with stretching, is there's two components to that. One is, do you have the range of motion indigenous to every human being and within normal range of motion limits? So that's full power. That's full range of motion. That's not ish, right? And you can be mid-range and just be fine, but that's not what we're doing. We need the full Monty. This is what I was designed to do. And I'm not talking about you and your special anthropometry. And, if you show up with your x-rays and saying that, look, my femurs are different than everyone else's, then I'm like, okay. But you're still within that standard deviation of normal range of motion. So when we've established range of motion through the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons or American Academy of physiatrists or family practitioners or even the physical therapists, those range of motion norms capture 99% of the population, right? So there are people who are on that 1%, but that's really, really small. And in those range of motion norms, all of that gets expressed in good strength and conditioning programming. So if you're following Pavel and Eric Frohart at Strong First, you're going to be exposed to those range of motion norms. If the FMS is a way of screening those range of motion norms. It doesn't ask us for full. It asks us for competent. And if you can't even hit those FMS competencies, those aren't even extreme, then you definitely have range of motion restrictions. And so what we want people to do is understand that when you're in the gym, every time I do a movement, it's an assessment. I'm assessing because it's a moving target. So if we take the average person who, is wealthy enough to afford golf, they usually, it's an expensive sport, typically, but there can be a lot of business travel in there. Let's just put it in, let's just make some generalizations. A lot of people play golf, but I see a lot of travelers who play golf. So go ahead and jump on an airplane from San Francisco to New York. Let me know how that goes for you. How'd you feel when you get off, right? And then, by the way, we've just messed up your circadian rhythms. So your sleep's going to be crap, and you're going to get up at 3 a.m, and then you're going to fly back. And probably had some alcohol in there. So you're now at your worst self. You're pre-diabetic, and you show up and your tissues aren't very resilient, and I guarantee you can't extend your hip or turn because you've been sitting and stuck in these chairs and on the airplanes. Now let's go and assess your range of motion in the gym. Well, guess what? It's not the same as when you left on Monday. It is not the same. And that's okay. That's a normal expression that our function is sort of a moving target. And one of the reasons that the gym practice has got to be vital, or yoga practice or Pilates practice or whatever language you speak in terms of movement practice, it's a way of restoring normal range of motion, and it's a way of identifying range of motion restriction. So, for example, one of our young athletes, she set the world record for time trial on the bike, and she spent some time with us, and she's a friend. Her name is Evelyn Stevens, and she's an extraordinary cyclist. She set the 1 hour world record for time trial, and she rode 47 kilometers in 1 hour, which is an insane speed. And by the way, she did it with no heart rate monitor, no watt meter. She just knew how she felt. That's what a good athlete she is. She can see the clock, but she knows if she's above and below and what her red line is. That's an extraordinary athlete. But one of the things we did in the gym is she says, hey, I'm worried about putting on a bunch of mass going into the season. And I was like, great. That's not why we squat. We squat to make sure that your hips work so that you can connect that powerful engine to the bike. And why? Because biking by itself is not a normal thing to do as a human being. And so subsequently, if you spend a lot of time biking, you're going to look like a cyclist. If you spend a lot of time sitting, you're going to look like a sitter, right? So one of the things we're trying to do in the gym is to reclaim function. And the best way to do that is simultaneously during the training. That's why we squat every day. That's why we use some squats in our warm-up. That's why we lunge every day. That's why we at least use some squatting-like shapes or lunging-like shapes in our warm-up. And when we start to view the gym that way, then all of a sudden, well, I have a template for this. I don't have to be perfect today because I'm going to work on something today. Then my soft tissue prep maybe works along, or my soft tissue work or the joint distraction work that we've popularized, it looks a lot like the start position and finish positions of one of the movements I'm doing in the gym. So if I'm pressing overhead, I'm going to work on improving the quality of my overhead position, or at least my front rack starting position with the dumbbells. And that gives me a really simple template to identify full range of motion, yes or no. And if I have full range of motion, then guess what it is? It's a technique problem. And that's easy, right? That's why when we define mobility, we have to define it as, do I have the raw range of motion requirements to be able to get into these positions? And I guarantee you 95% of the golfers that we see do not. Then do I have the skill to be able to express that range of motion? And that's why it's a skill. Golfing is a skill. Bench pressing is a skill. Squatting is a skill. Running is a skill. We should always be working to refine our skills. When do you say to yourself, my swing is there, I'm going to stop working on it, I'm just going to use it for the next decade? It never happens. It just doesn't happen. And that's because it's an open-ended skill. You can never become too skilled. But what does happen is that your range of motion literally changes, or you become stiff, or something happens, and suddenly that skill isn't able to express itself. Why? Because your thoracic spine is stiff as frack. You cannot even extend through your T-spine. So how do you think you're going to rotate if your spine is bent in a C? You're going to rotate out of plane, and no wonder your backswing sucks. Well, it has nothing to do with your backswing. It has everything to do with the fact that you spent the last week hunched over your laptop. You can't even breathe. That thing doesn't rotate. You have no extension in your T-spine. Guess what? We can fix that. And we just have to do it 10 minutes a day.
That's, we tend to go to the technique side, especially with the golfers. The ball goes squirrely, or you don't rotate through a swing or whatever. We go to the golf pro and figure out, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? As opposed to looking at the ranges of motion. And even in the gym, I think it's so important that you brought up the fact that just preparing that day for what you're going to be doing that day. Because a lot of times I feel like we get in the gym, kind of warm up mindlessly, and then jump right in, not really having any real idea of why we did our warm up, except to get our heart rate going,
right?
And not working on those specific things. And I like that you point out that there's not really a difference between injury prevention and performance in the gym. You have to kind of combine those all together.
Yeah, well, we're not, I don't open up my hips so that I don't get hurt golfing. That's the worst reason. The reason I have this capacity is that so I can go kick ass really quickly. And that's what I want people to understand. If you do the work in the gym, right, and you're still breathing hard, and you're still training and using the classic modes of strength conditioning, whatever you like, then it's going to require, when I actually do go get warm, all I'm doing is warming up. And my warm-up shouldn't necessarily be to reclaim my missing range of motion. I've already done that. That's what I've been working on all week. So that when Thursday afternoon comes along and my tee time comes up, I am prepared to go. And then all I have to do is get hot and sweaty and take some swings and remind myself how to swing, and I'm ready. So here's a good example. The other week I went boating, and it's a little. I used to be a professional kayaker. I did a little class 5 the other week. And, the chances for me to get really hot and sweaty in the boat are very low. I have to be ready to go when I push into the water. It's class 4, boom, ready to go. And that's hardcore. So guess what my prep work looks like before I even pick up the paddle? Arm swings and hip wheels and groundwork and flow, and I'm hot and sweaty in my shoulder. And when I put my skirt on and push off, I'm ready then to let my skill carry me. And all I've had to do is get hot and sweaty and make sure I can maintain those positions. And that's what we should be doing during warm-up, right? Re-arousing the nervous system, shifting blood, getting the blood out of my stomach into my tissues in my shoulders, right? Working on arousal, practicing skill, not trying to fix the fact that I have no internal rotation in my shoulder. I can't hip hinge without, that's the wrong time for that. And don't get me wrong, you can still be an extraordinary golfer and not do any of the things we're talking about. And that's the problem. I know you can go out and beat the pants off your friends, but that's not the conversation we're having. We're having the conversation of saying, how do I become the best athlete, the best golfer, the best mover I can, given what's going on in my life? And I think that's the other issue, is that, all of these practices, we just have to work in a sustainable way that gives us the best shot. Because I have 2 kids, I have 40 employees, I travel, I get it, but I have a movement practice, and, I wake up in the morning and do a little breathing. I've already been in the sauna today, and I walk my kids to school, and I've already been at the gym since 8:30. You know what I mean? So it's not that I don't get it, but the idea here is I may not be able to train today. I might not have enough time, but I've already done a whole bunch of moving around. And even as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm not sitting, I'm on the floor, and I've been opening up my hips the entire time. Because if there's a window of opportunity that opens for me to be able to train today, or go swing a club today, or paddle today, I want to be ready for that. And that really shifts my mindset around, right? That means that I'm already kind of laying this foundation. Here's a good example. All the research shows that drinking alcohol is horribly cardiac irritating, and pretty much it's a neurotoxin. Does that mean I don't drink alcohol? No, it does not. It means that, if you pour $100 bottle of wine for me, I'm going to have a glass of the most amazing $100 bottle of wine, right? I'm not going to be a jerk. But when I'm sleep deprived and stressed, what I don't do is add the alcohol in on top of that, right? I save having an ice cold beer for when I am rested and in a state where I can take that. And if I'm going to go try to play, that's just one of the examples of sometimes where we've disconnected behaviors from output. And golf, unfortunately, it's interesting. I have 2 golf stories I should just share. One is that I grew up, I went to Carmel High School, and my football coach was also the golf coach, and he was one of my best friends, and really a great mentor, and we were very close. He's like, Kelly, I was a junior, and he's like, you have got to join the golf team. And I was like, Coach, I don't golf. I'm a football player, bro. And, I'm on the student body. I'm like a nerd. Like, I don't golf. And he's like, I'm going to teach you to golf. It'll change your life. And I was like, no, thank you. And he's like, you don't understand. Well, what I didn't understand is that they played Pebble Beach every day.
Oh my God.
That was our home course. And he's like, I am running a scam. I play Pebble every day. And I get paid to play Pebble, So that's the greatest. Like, literally, people were like, "Can you talk about something you would do over again?" I'm like, "Yes, I should learn how to play golf," and got school credit for it on Pebble. So, and I don't remember the second story I was going to say is. Oh no, I got sidetracked. But the idea here is I want to be ready to go. That's really what it comes down to.
All right, I know we're kind of running a little low on time here. But I got a couple other questions that some folks wanted to ask, and so I'm going to kind of dive off in some different directions here. One of them, we had the man Gary Reinl on talking about ice and anti-ice man, as obviously you know. And I had a couple questions that came in after that podcast, especially kind of talking about things that they saw you doing. They know that you and Gary work together. Can you clarify the position that you have on icing with injuries? And then also we saw that you have a brand new ice tub, or maybe not brand new, but ice tub in the back where you do ice plunges. Why would you do one, not the other? And can you kind of give us some insight on the cold stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we do cold water immersion, we are usually in the water for about 3 to 4 minutes. And it's not around injury. It is around central nervous system reset. There's a whole bunch of potentially amazing things that happen in the cold water. But I will say that just like icing an injury, getting cold after hard training slows down the adaptation response to training the same way that icing slows healing. So what we don't advocate for is icing after intense exercise. Controlling your core temperature, put your hands in some ice water, take a cold shower. If it's 100 degrees and your temperature is 106, and you're spinning out, get cold, right? So what we try to do is we put the cold water immersion as far away from the training stimulus as you can. So I usually train early afternoon, but I ice in the morning. So I've had as much time away from damage, and I'll say damage in quotation marks, adaptation stimulus, right, which is the same sort of mechanisms of repair and healing and adaptation. Exercise doesn't make us stronger. Training makes us weaker. It's our response to the exercise that makes us more resistant, right? That's what happens. It's stimulus response. So we have recognized that getting into the ice tank after training is the fastest way of limiting the benefits from the training stimulus adaptation. We still do not ice injuries. So, if I'm talking about getting something cold and numb for 20 minutes, that's very different than me getting cold once for 3 minutes, and especially as far away as possible. So we don't lose neuromuscular connection because we don't go numb. We're not in there long enough to cause the vasculature, like the lymphatic vasculature, to redilate and reperfuse the tissues, right? Recongest the tissues. What we're seeing is that we are having really good luck at spinning people up from sort of dead central nervous system readiness. So if you are trash, go take a cold shower. I guarantee you it's one of the ways that it's very restorative on the nervous system. So I fell into icing in the morning because of our association with Laird Hamilton. That's when he did it. And, as a practice, it really made sense to me first thing. And it was easy to get cold once and then warm back up again. So we still do not ice injuries. Active recovery is best, as Gary said. And, it's shocking to think that was ever taught to me as a physio and a coach to ice. And we haven't iced in forever and ever and ever. And we still manage to still help people set world records and heal from injuries, right? But it's more work. And I understand, sometimes I just want to lay there and have passive modalities done to me. And icing looks like one of those things, but it's unfortunately, it's really, really harmful. So don't ice.
Gotcha. And for all of you that didn't listen to the episode with Gary, that's episode number 114. You can get all the details on the anti-icing movement. But that definitely helped clear it up. Clarify.
So we're clearing, it's not a movement. There's you either believe in science and practice, or you don't. So it's totally fine. There's not a single piece of evidence that supports the use of ice as an intervention to speed healing. So I just want to be crystal clear on that. If you want to heal slower and screw yourself up, by all means, continue to ice. However, I will say a warm margarita is ungodly. So, use your ice appropriately.
I love it. All right, I got a couple final questions for you, Kelly, real quick here. First one, probably the most important question of the day. Are you more of a Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore fan?
Caddyshack. That's interesting because, I always say, I ask people stripes or meatballs. Because I think you can tell a lot of people about people's stripes or meatballs, know?
Right.
And we also say, we follow that up with two more questions. Twizzlers or Red Vines?
Twizzlers.
Oh, Red Vines for me. And French Queen, Scottish peasant girl from Braveheart.
Ooh, Scottish peasant girl.
Yeah, interesting. For me, it's French Queen, Red Vines, and stripes.
I was going to say stripes.
There you go.
All right, man, you just interviewed me. That was awesome. All right, if golf was like baseball or like an MMA fight or boxing match, and you got to pick a song as you're walking up to the tee box, what is Kelly Starrett's song?
Oh, I remember suddenly what I was going to say about golf, and this will tie in. The closest thing, so I paddled the Whitewater slalom, which is where they hang the gates over the river and you negotiate. You see it in the Olympics every 4 years, and then it's like standing in a cold shower ripping up $20 bills. It's the most esoteric, most difficult whitewater sport on the planet. In fact, we say that the closest thing that approximates that experience is golf, except it's golf with your heart rate really high, like speed golf. Mm-hmm. And you have to be technically excellent in a very dynamic situation, and your heart rate is really, really, really high. And what we found was that it was really difficult to string together. Usually there's like 22 to 24 gates. It's almost impossible to have 24 good gates. What you would do is you would have 3 gates that you killed and everything else you survived. And that would be like golf. You had 3 moments where you're like, you killed it. 3 perfect swings out of an entire day and you have to appreciate the process of that. You're only as good as your next swing, and you're only as good as your next swing. And every time is a chance to reinvent yourself. It is the most egoless game. It is like archery in the same way. Like you screw it up, you get immediate feedback, you screwed up, you have to turn the inner eye inwards. I cannot to this day get all fired up. That does not work. When my heart rate is high, I have to be precise. So I want to hear like emotional ballads. I want to hear, like good like electronic dance music will get me going. Every once in a while, a really strange song will come on and people are like, what are you listening to? I'm like, I'm getting fired up right now. And that part of it is I want to feel emotion, so I'm connected, but I can't get over ramped. I can't do it. All of a sudden I get all stiff and mechanical. So I'm like, whoa, that works if I'm lifting something heavy. No, it doesn't even work then. I always am thinking music is about coming down. If you listen to my playlist in this last 6-hour race I did, you'd be like, Kelly is so happy and chill. And so I can't get angry.
Touch with his feelings.
Man, it's about feelings, bro. I got to feel. And that's, it's interesting. I raced C2, which is 2-man canoe. And my C2 partner liked a quick warm up and then go. And I needed to be in the boat. I wanted to feel the bot and just blend. And then we always were pulling and pushing each other. Because for me, it's all about feel. Once I get my feel back, I'm invincible. But I need enough contact to make feel. Love it.
All right, what has you most excited for what's going on with Mobility WOD, everything you guys are doing? I know you're going on a big trip over to Europe pretty soon. What's exciting for you over the next couple of months?
One of the fun things is we're changing the format a little bit. I won't talk about it much now, but we are working hard. We have got a good model. A good model for human movement has to be predictive and explanatory and repeatable. And our model, we just keep trying to break. Understanding complex skills, how we wind up. If you and I spent some time together golfing, even though I'm an amateur golfer, I can tell you why you do the things you do and where you're restricted just by using our model, which comes out of other disciplines. So it has to be cross-cohort disciplinary. So we have a good model, but what we're trying to do is help people figure out how to apply it in a really sustainable, succinct way. And that's really, if you work one-on-one with anyone, you're going to get results. We know that's the truth, but we need programs and processes that fit into your crazy ass life. And so we're working hard on that. We've got a book coming out in the fall called Flight Plan, which is about how to survive airplane travel and come back intact. So we want you to be able to, get to where your destination is, kick some butt on whatever it is you're doing, and then come back and also be intact, because you land, we're going to go play. And if you land, you're going to go be a dad or a mom, and you need to be able to hit the ground running. And so there are definitely practices that we've pulled out of best experiences and best practices from the world's best traveling, hardworking athletes. And I think when we share those in a really cogent, sustainable, integrative way, you can just turn little wrenches. I love what Eric Cressy says: small hinges open big doors, and it's true.
Very cool. Yeah, we didn't even get to talk a whole lot about the different books that you've written. We'll have to bring you on another time and talk about all four. Nah. It'll be 4 books then. But I just want to say thank you for the time today and taking time out of your busy schedule and all the amazing things that you've done for professionals like myself, but everyone out there that's trying to get better, be better humans, move better, and do everything that they can. How can the 18 Strong community support you and what you guys are doing? And then any last piece of advice you have for the audience?
But one of the things that, again, we're trying to do is solve sort of movement-related problems, right? We just don't think we're having too many surgeries, we're experiencing too much pain, and there's some really easy ways out of that. One of the things that we're really proud of is my wife and I started a couple years ago a nonprofit called Stand Up Kids, which flips middle school and elementary school, high schools, public high schools and middle schools from traditional sedentary desks to moving desks to standing desks. And so far we have about 60, 70,000 kids in the United States standing and not sitting anymore as it relates to this. And it turns out, again, we can ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a human being? But if you went, you're seeing is you're not designed to sit. And a lot of the problems that most athletes are having with their golf swing in this population results from the errors and the habitus that we're spending all the rest of our time in. So if we're moving more during the day and not compromising in our spinal mechanics, spinal position, and intra-abdominal stabilization and pelvic floor, we're going to see improved function expressed. Why? Simply because we're being more human. And the earlier we start these interventions, I have one of my daughters is in the 3rd grade, about to graduate in 3rd grade. She's never sat at a traditional desk. Wow. So from kindergarten on, she's always been at a moving desk. And she's not a cashier, she's moving and sitting, and they sit on the ground and they're moving around, and there's a foot swing bar and they lean, and every desk is individualized for the child. But I guarantee you, that kid, she runs like a perfect athlete. She doesn't compensate. I don't have to remind her about her posture. All of those things are built in. And so if you're interested, take a look at standupkids.org. And, we've partnered with Donors Choose, and look and see if there's a classroom near you. You can donate to a classroom and hopefully, instead of getting kids to quit smoking, we just don't put the cigarette in their mouth in the first place. That's how we're looking at this.
I love it, man. We'll have all that info on the show notes page so people can go and link directly to that. I love that, and I'm glad that we were able to get that on the show here and mention that. Any last piece of advice for the audience before we let you go?
No, just don't make it about how far you hit the ball. Make it about how well you hit the ball, and understand that one of the reasons we're fans of golf is that you can golf until you're dead, literally golf until you're dead. And with just a little input, it just golf is one of the few, I think, sports and activities where it's not just about raw physiology, it's about skill. And if we applied that thinking to other aspects of our life, then there's sort of no limit to our ability to become better and more skilled human beings. And that is very exciting. Very
well said. Kelly, once again, thank you for all your time. The 18 Strong community is going to love this one, and I look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Pleasure.
Thanks again for joining us on the 18 Strong podcast this week with our super special guest, Kelly Starrett. If you want any more information on Kelly, Mobility WOD, the Stand Up for Kids initiative, just go to 18strong.com/Kelly-Starrett, or you can look this up as episode number 143. We'll have all of the information linked up in the show notes to take you right wherever you want to go. I can't say thanks enough to Kelly, but I want to encourage you to go check out some of his content either on YouTube or at mobilitywod.com to see some of the great content and information that he's been putting out for so many years, almost 7 years now, which is kind of incredible after hearing the story that he had to go through to upload his first video. So once again, thanks for joining us here on 18 Strong. Don't forget to check out Scratch TV and the Super Speed Golf Overspeed Training System. If you're not yet in our private Facebook group, the 18 Strong Movement, what are you waiting for? Get on over there, join the conversation. We want to meet you. We want to know what questions you have, how we can help, and just bring you in the conversation on helping golfers become stronger, fitter, more mentally strong human beings in general. And if I could ask for one simple favor for you, if you haven't done it already, the best way to get the word out on the 18 Strong podcast and make other golfers aware that this content is out here is to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, as well as leave a rating and review. It only takes a couple of minutes and will definitely help us continue to get some great guests like Kelly on the show. All right, thanks again for being here this week. Train hard, practice smart, and play better golf. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.